My snowman gets a cameo and everybody.
Okay, guys.
So we came up with this idea of stockgen. So essentially, like here, our close friend Josh, he has been really passionate about this idea from the very beginning because he's a trader by profession for 30 years, and we wanted to come up with a cool idea of like how can we all become rich without being evil. And that's our goal. I mean, so essentially we were thinking about like what's our mission statement because we don't want to be evil. So if you look at like Google organizing world's information, so we were like, okay, we want to become everyone's financial assistant. You know why? Because monkeys are better than humans at managing finance. This is a real problem. Most of the world is financially illiterate. So the question that you see, it's a simple question, but more than 2/3 of Americans are not able to answer that question. And so it's like a huge problem. 14% of the people are actually invested in the stock market. 14%, 1/4. And who are invested, they also have no idea about how to invest. So it's a big problem. And so what stockgen is, it's your personal financial advisor, which is how do we get into the brain of this person who's sitting right to me, and essentially come up with dumb advices, a really good software. Again, we had a solid team of how to make the user experience best, and come up with a simple web application such that if you spend like maybe 2 minutes a month, then you would be well off in terms of retirement. So that was our goal, and how do we make it easy and fun? So the team, again, Josh, we had the domain expert. How do we get his 30 years of knowledge? Because he would always talk about stocks and whatnot. So how do we get together? So for that, we had Nathan, who is really passionate about technology. Lou, excellent web designer. So even the design of the logo, we were already thinking of well ahead. Like when we launched this product, like excellent web designer. And we, by profession, all I did was making sure everyone got together. We had a plan on day one. And actually, we were ready on day one. To be honest with you, we were always building up on things. So that's all I did, which is nothing. So, product roadmap. Product roadmap, web app. So, you are going to see the web app right away. And that's all, you will see. Voice assistant. So, again, once we have validated the product in the market, because all I am about is product validation. No matter how good is the idea, we need to get in the market, get the feedback, and then integrate with Alexa and some of the things where people don't have time. If it's so easy, the best way is to not even touch the web UI. And then long term is AI assistant, and the reason is because that's my areas of expertise: data science, AI, and machine learning. So I really believe that this app, if this really works, and if there is user acceptance, we can integrate with other systems, and it will start automatically recommending and allocating your assets, which is you don't have to think about anything. So that's our long-term vision. How does it work? Josh, can you talk?
Sure. So let me give you some background of how this is stock. It's essentially a stock tip generator. So it's going to generate tips for you. So every quarter, investment managers who have over $100 million of assets under management, they need to update the SEC regarding their portfolio holdings. So 4 times a year, these big guys have to tell the SEC what their portfolios are. So we have this huge database of around 4,445 large investors who are required by law to update the database. And their holdings change constantly every quarter. They buy stuff, they sell stuff. So how can we tailor all that information down and boil it down and tailor it for your purposes? So there's hundreds of holdings for each of these 4,000 managers, so there's lots of data to comb through. How do we data mine this? And that's what the problem was. So these, basically what happens is when they update it, there's a mad rush of everyone who follows these guys. Hey, what did Steve Cohen buy? Hey, what you know? And you have to go through individually and locate. It's a very tedious, time-consuming process. So it gives the public a glimpse into which companies large investors are putting their money in. And many look to these managers not only for investment guidance, but for portfolio construction. There's a lot of people who follow these large investors, and they try to mirror their portfolios and what they're investing in. So stockgen was developed for people who want to track large investors. Before stockgen, the only way to do this is to look up each individual's holdings individually. It's a very time-consuming process, as I said. So first, you have to know who you're going to follow. Which one of those 4,000 managers are you going to view as a valid source to follow? Secondly, you want to locate what their top positions are. What are their top 10 positions? Then you want to find out what are they making the most conviction bets on? Where are they deploying the most capital? So you look at the percent increase from the previous quarter to the next quarter. What have they increased the most? And finally, you want to know what their newest and freshest ideas are. So you want to find out what are their new positions. They had zero before, and now they have something, which indicates that they're on to something new and exciting, and they see some new technology that they want to invest in. So stockgen was built to solve these problems. It follows extremely shrewd funds. For this demo, we're going to be following a very large hedge fund. They have about $15 billion under management by the name of the Baker Brothers. And they are a healthcare specialist based out of New York. They are the smartest guys in the room when it comes to healthcare and investing. Everyone looks at the Baker Brothers. But stockgen is able to follow multiple funds. But for this demonstration, we're keeping it simple. And we're only going to be showing you one fund. So it's unlimitedly, it's expandable, we can build on it, so that I had originally had about 17 funds I wanted to generate all this information from. And we were generating all these API calls, and I said, you know what, and Nathan agreed, let's just keep it to one, and so we can just demonstrate the concept. So we have all this information. We're going to tailor it down for the individual, and we're going to show you how the app works, and we're going to have Nathan come up and demonstrate the app.
Thanks for that introduction, Josh. All right, the technology. Okay, so I'm going to be having to look at this because not even I can remember everything that I did. So we're using Node.js with ES6 syntax, which has a lot of handy modern features, because when it comes to an application like this, we're dealing with a lot of complex data structures that are heavily nested and have a lot of information that we're dealing with. We're also dealing with multiple AJAX requests to several different data feeds. And so the objective would be for us using Node.js is to consolidate all this data into one object, and the ES6 syntax helps us, for example, have computed object values so that we can assign a variable that's constantly being computed on the fly to an object. It allows us to use things like template literal strings. I'll get more to ES6 syntax in a little bit. But we're using a fintech API called Neutrino, which is a financial API that allows us to allocate portfolios and statistics on them. We're using the IEX free API, which we're able to extract free real-time stock prices from. We're using an API called Clearbit, which we plug in URLs extracted from Neutrino and are able to actually grab logos from these websites. Now, Clearbit can't grab every single logo, but it's able to grab the majority of them. We're using Firebase for our database so that we have our Node.js application requesting the data from the server on a regular basis, pushing it to Firebase so we don't have to make any additional calls for the data and use up our requests or bothering Trinio with 10,000 plus API calls. We're using jQuery for DOM manipulation, and we're using a JavaScript library, really popular one called Lodash, for which makes complex data structure operations very easy. Now, we actually were 100% convinced we weren't even going to be able to follow through with this project after our experience with our first API. The API which will not be named. But if you look at this request URL format right here, this is actually the format for the query that you had to do. And so below this, I break it down. The args is a base 64 encoded JSON argument. Simple enough, I just go to a base 64 encoder and put in the JSON argument, so that was fine. The API shared key, cool, we have that. The API signature, okay, so we're reading the documentation. It said, a signature to be created using a server-side language such as Ruby to make a base 64 encoded HMAC SHA-1 encrypted digest of a given secret key, plus the argument combined with an ASCII new line and a timestamp. so we didn't know Ruby, so
This was Josh's favorite API.
Yeah, I said you gotta use this API.
And the fun part is will follow after all of this.
So we didn't know Ruby, so the get around was to use the crypto.js library available at code.google.com for HMAC SHA-1 encryption and moment.js for a timestamp. And when that sweet JSON came in, this is what came out. So, subscription required, not available after all that hard work. So Josh and I were probably on Slack for 2 hours, freaking out, trying to scour into the internet for as many APIs as
And I
possible.
was on vacation in USA.
And so finally,
You don't need to speak Japanese.
so we need Trinio, developer-friendly fintech API. Trinio allows access via HTTPS authentication, and the great thing is that Node.js has a built-in HTTPS request module. That use ES6 syntax for computing property key values and objects on the fly. Use template literals for easy templating the URLs. If I show you my code, you can take a look at that, but I'm not sure if we can do that. Arrow functions, other handy modern features. I was using a library called Browserify so that I could debug the Node.js application in the Chrome console. Essentially what that does is it just bundles all of the Node modules together for presentation in the browser. It's really sweet. That and Webpack are really great libraries. Firebase is included as a Node module. And I coded the program so that we are taking data from multiple Trinio feeds, consolidating it into a single nested objects within one larger JSON object, and pushing that to Firebase. And as I mentioned before, this way we're minimizing API calls to an as-needed basis.
Can you go to that?
To that, yes.
So again, all of this highfalutin, complicated things on the domain side, we had to make it really, really, really simple. So it's essentially assessing all the things that Josh talked about and coming up with the algorithm and getting the information and asking it and making it into really simple things.
So we have
we have 3 buttons here. The safe bet is going to list the top 10 holdings for each fund that we select. This gamble is going to list the holdings that have the greatest percent increase quarter over quarter. And the innovation is going to show the newest positions where they had 0 the previous quarter and they have something now. So those are the 3 kind of buckets that we threw the information into, and Nathan was able to write the code to get these done.
So you want safe bet? You feel like a gambler?
Yeah, I mean whatever you want. I think let's do safe bet first.
And there we are.
So here we go. So here are the top 10 positions of a $15 billion hedge fund name, and we have the logo being sucked in from Clearbit. We have the company name. We have the company symbol. This is the last update. This is how much they actually own the fund that we're profiling. This is a real-time stock price. We have 3 buttons for each. We wanted to make it look like a business card, so it kind of had a formal feel. So, and then there's 3 buttons where you can visit the website of that particular stock. You can visit FinViz, which is a financial data service to perform your own analysis. It gives you graphs, it gives you news, it gives you lots of stuff. And then there's the final button, which is Stock Twits, which is kind of like a Twitter for stock people. And it gives you the feed and it tells you what people are saying about it on a social basis. So that's a safe bet, and it's really a clean site, because in order to now let's do gamble. So now, in order to find gamble, you'd have to go into the fund that you're looking at and click and try to find out which ones they increased the most. So here we have how much they increased, and it's the same basic buttons, and it can show you where they're deploying the most of the most capital, and you can see where they're making conviction bets on. And then if we change it to innovation, this is where they had 0 before and are making new fresh capital commitments to individual companies. So here they had 0 last time, and now they just started buying these things. So right now we have 1 fund hooked up, but we have about 17 right now that are in our pipeline that can easily be hooked up to the system. And eventually, I'm going to work on a way to diversify this so it's not spitting out all its stockgen.
So we're actually going to be able to, we're in
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah, drugs. Yeah.
Yes.
We're actually,
Yeah. Well, these are all clinical style or clinical trial stage companies. So these are all companies that have working on researching the next generation of medicine, and that's where I focus my time. But I want to eventually diversify this so it gives more diversified tips. That's the next phase, really.
synthetic tetracycline compounds, anyone?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and actually I was communicating with the people that own the API, and they're going to be adding data soon to the feed that we're currently pulling from, so that we could likely algorithmically recommend diversified portfolios.
Yeah, and what we want is the aggregate portfolio performance, and so eventually the API was going to have the information so that we'll be able to pull like the top 20 performing funds out of this group, so we can spit out the highest performers, and it's really going to be, I think, a cool thing to have.
So, is it a question time?
Yeah. Well, Lou has to talk about her design process.
So after these 3 guys talk about the project, the problem, the solution, the technology, and here I am talking about the design process. So this is our design process. So first thing that the project was being introduced, we did the first day, we did the whiteboarding, brainstorming, and we did the concepting of the logo, the company name, or like what are we going to call this, and then we're trying to make like a mock it up so Nathan and the product managers and financial advisors could know what we're talking about and how we can build stuff, and then we would like to like prototype and develop the pages so everyone can see how things would work, like from the home page to the inner pages and all those page flows right now. So this is our whiteboard brainstorming. That's Saturday, so it was kind of like we were so excited and like we're really trying to like make this work out, and everything is like wireframing and like flow charts and such. And the logo is we came up with Josh wanted to have something in vintage look and feel, 1800 street lamp, old lighthouse, moving forward direction. So I came up with this different kinds of logos, and they picked. So here are logo identity. So we picked blue and orange because we know blue is more trustworthy company, and orange were friendly, young and hip. So I was trying to hit like the millennials group. So those are so that's why we have that friendly. And so I suggested like 1, 2, 3, 4 options for them to pick what logos they want. So they picked this right here. So the lighthouse and sans serif was bolder and more of a classic design. And so I created a mock-up for the day 2 of our project because we needed Nathan to like understand how the page would flow and such. So I created a mock-up for a modal design, and then I created this one of the inner page for the safe band. So it's basically like a bare bone, no logos yet, but it's just like the navigation, like the stack parts. So Nathan could really get through his JavaScripts and all these technologies he has. And here's the prototype. We've used Materialize CSS, and we did this one of our team, our services, and content page. So basically, that's the design process, my contribution.
Awesome.
Question, Jogi. Yeah, so how often do you call the endpoint? How often are you calling the...
So right now you have to do that manually, but what I'm going to be doing is setting up a cron job, which is essentially an automated execution of a script on the server side. We're going to be doing that once a day, just in case. I mean, it really only needs to be done once a quarter, but once a day, just in case the stocks fluctuate.
Well, what happens is the only reason why it would change between quarters is if one of these guys took down 10% of the stock outstanding. So by law, if they buy more than 10% of a new company, they would put out a new holding. But if they don't do that, if they don't do that 10% threshold, you have to wait until the next quarter. So we will check it once a day to see if there's any new 10% positions being bought. But really, this database will only be updated once a quarter. But that day when that update occurs, it happens like all of a sudden, and I'm anxious to see if it's gonna update really well. I'm sure it will. That's the day where the real test comes. When they have to update the SEC.
And of course, who's your customer? Is it like like me, just a retail investor?
We have a bunch of ideas. I could see this product being used by investment advisors who want to recommend specific stocks. This could be for proprietary traders who have a more hands-on stock construction desire. It could be for individual investors who just want to get good tips. It could be for other funds who want to mimic, who don't have 100 million under management, but they want to mimic the big guys. So let's say they only manage $5 million. It could be family offices who want to mimic the large guys. Anyone who wants to see what the big guys are doing without going through each individual thing, you can get it all at a click of a button. And
Financial literacy.
yeah, and we also wanted to use it to promote interest in investment and economics and finance and so forth. So it could be used as an education application as well.
Where are you getting your hedge funds filings?
Well, that's through Intrinio and IEX for the real-time stock data. But these funds who I've picked, I know are healthcare specialists. So as I said, now we're gonna change the funds that it follows so that it's not only limited to healthcare. So we're going to change it so it's going to give you a more well-rounded stock tip generation, and so that's a work in progress.
All right. Check it out. All right, we've got one more team to go, but if should we take a quick little 5-minute potty break?
We'll be quick.
Okay. Oh, you'd be quick. Okay, all right. Let's just.
Oh, wait, maybe they need a complaint break.
Wait, did anybody need to go
It's
to the
all right.
bathroom? Okay.
Nice to get this going. All right.